Now, education ministers are expected to thrash out the details of a plan for an overhaul of school funding at a meeting in Sydney today. The Gonski report recommends fundamentally changing the model so there's a basic level of funding per student and extra money for disadvantaged children. For more, the Federal School Education Minister Peter Garrett joins us now from Sydney. Good morning to you, Peter Garrett. Thank you very much for being with us. How confident are you that you're going to get any kind of substantial result out of this meeting, given what the states have been saying since the Gonski report was released and the fact that they will have to cop most of the burden of this increased funding?
Well, Karina, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to get an education funding model in place that's fair and effective. And Mr Gonski's recommendations were very clear. We're seeing decline in education performance around the country, and we've got big gaps in equity from kids from low SES communities. So we need to take the next steps in work that he identified. I'm calling on the states to come to this meeting in a spirit of cooperation and goodwill. I believe we have to put the national interest in education ahead of state interests at this point in time, and I want to work with the states. We've set up working groups to identify how we might go through those Gonski recommendations. Now it's time to roll up our sleeves and get on with that work. You
want to introduce new funding legislation by the end of the year. The Victorian Education Minister says that that's unrealistic. So how likely is it that you're going to get any kind of progress on this in this year?
Well, we've already started work. And this comes on the back of a record level of investment in national partnerships on things like teacher quality and literacy and numeracy, and we have a national curriculum in place. We secured that agreement with the states. So I think there are some good foundations in positive education reform that we can build on, and those working groups will have to work hard. There's no question about that. But if the states come to the table willing to cooperate, we're not trying to impose anything on them. We just know that in every state, the issues that were identified by Mr Gonski are real issues. We know that our future prosperity demands that our kids have an absolutely first-class education, and we think this is the time to do that work.
Well, the West Australian government says that at this stage it can't actually see any benefit for the state in following the reforms outlined in the Gonski report.
Well, Mr Gonski's findings were pretty clear, Karina. I mean, he said the current funding model is illogical, it's not effective necessarily, and no one understands it. He also said that our top performing students are not doing as well as they could against their international counterparts, and we have a big tail of low performing students. That applies to Western Australia as much as it does to New South Wales or Victoria. So I'm urging those states to set aside their political short-term issues of concern, if they have some, and recognise that this is genuinely something which I think the community wants to see us work on together.
And what about the federal government itself? That's you need to contribute about 30% of the something like $5 billion a year that's required to put these recommendations in place. How are you going to do that and maintain this commitment to a budget surplus?
Well, look, the first thing we've said is that we are committed to the budget surplus, and we want to go through this work now, look at the model and agree a model where we can with the states. The second thing is that we've almost doubled the spending on education as a federal government. So I don't think our bona fides on supporting education are in question, but we've got to get the horse in front of the cart. We're not going to run around talking about money at this point in time because we need to do the work to see what a model would look like. I think that's sensible. And I think that has support from education stakeholders generally. And I would just encourage the states to recognise that Mr Gonski himself said, this figure I've put up is an estimate. We now know more work needs to be done. The states have access to the data about their own schools. Let's sit down and work this through together. It's in the nation's interest. It's certainly in the students' interest.
Peter Garrett, I just need to ask you about the Fair Work Australia investigation into the Health Services Union. The opposition is calling for Fair Work Australia to engage an independent law firm so that it can put together a brief of evidence to present to the Commonwealth DPP. Do you think that the federal government should support that?
Oh, look, I know Minister Shorten has already made comments about this, and there'll be additional comments in the day. I think the key thing at this stage of this debate is that these are independent bodies, and they have to come to their own view about what appropriate steps they need to take. Their independence needs to be recognised at this stage of the game.
And what about the ACTU's move to suspend the HSU from the organisation? That's likely to do that later today, given that the investigation, the details of the investigation aren't even known yet.
Well, again, these are matters for these independent bodies. The ACTU is an independent organisation. It will make its call on these issues as it sees fit.
And what about the federal government? Surely this isn't playing out well, all the surrounding attention that Craig Thomson is receiving as a result of this?
Well, there's always going to be debate around issues of this kind when they emerge. That's a part of today's media cycle, Karina. I'm focused on working with education ministers who are coming from around Australia to look at a future funding model on education, which I think will have long-term positive benefits for all Australian students if we can reach agreement. And that's what I'm focusing on.
Well, best of luck with it, Peter Garrett. Thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.